This week we have another batch of creepy pastas submitted by all of you guys. So grab your flashlights and lock your doors, because it's time for another Basement Terror, Part 3. First up, we have a story from a user called The Giant Hamster. I was about 8 years old, and I used to wake up every morning before my parents did, so that I could watch cartoons. One day, I woke up to what sounded like chains dragging metal moans. I sat there, confused, while the noise got louder and louder until I heard the sound of footsteps. The footsteps stopped right outside my door, and then they began to slowly open it. Thinking it was my mum, I yelled, "Come in," because I wanted her to know that I was awake, so she could come tuck me in and wake me up when it was time for school. The door opened further, and something cold, fetid, slimy, and wet touched my cheek. That's when I realized that it wasn't my mother standing there. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life. It had a thin, emaciated body and a very long neck. Its skin was gray and slimy, and it looked like it had been soaking in water for years. Its head was almost triangular and kind of mouse-like, except it didn't have any whiskers or cute little ears. It had 2 eye sockets without any eyes inside them. Its mouth stretched ear to ear, revealing a few teeth that were coated with what looked like dirt and maggots. Then it started to speak. Its voice sounded like fingernails scratching across a chalkboard, and it spoke in a language that I could understand. But I felt the meaning behind its words. It wanted me to leave the house. So I asked, "Are you my father?" And it replied, "Go away." Then it made a gesture with one of its long, gnarled fingers, as if to push me away. I screamed, scrambling out of bed, and ran to my parents' bedroom. My dad answered, dazed and confused, and I told him to come see what was in my doorway. But once he got there, the creature was gone. Now he says that I was just dreaming, but I know what I saw. I never went back to that house. Next up, we have a story from a user named Susan Grace. I was alone in the house and downstairs watching television late at night. My brother was at college, and my parents were away for the weekend. There was a knock at the door, and I cautiously opened it to find no one there. As I turned to close the door, I heard a whisper that said, "Let me in." I slammed the door shut and locked it, assuming it was my imagination. About an hour later, I heard movement in the living room. I thought maybe it was my cat, but when I stepped into the living room to investigate, I saw that the sliding glass door was wide open, and my cat was sitting on the couch, watching it intently. I closed the door and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was awoken to what sounded like someone dragging themselves across the hardwood floor. I assumed it was my cat, but when I got up to check, the whole house was silent, so I went back to bed. The commotion started again, and I got up again to investigate. This time, I noticed that my wardrobe door was slightly ajar. The door had antique brass hinges, and a large brass handle that was always cool to the touch. But that night, the handle was unusually warm. I knew instinctively that I shouldn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. As I pushed the door open, a blinding white light erupted from the closet. I squeezed my eyes shut and stumbled backwards, falling onto the floor. When I opened my eyes, The closet was pitch black. I could feel a strong draft coming from it, and I started to get a strange sense of foreboding. I immediately regretted opening the door, and I rushed to close it. But when I reached for the handle, it was ice cold again. I tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light and that there was nothing in the closet. But I knew, deep down, that I had disturbed something malevolent. Afraid to go back to bed, I curled up on the couch and waited for sunrise. And lastly, we have a story from a user named King of Toasters. I was homesick from school. The year before, I'd been diagnosed with a heart condition that made it hard for me to do anything physically demanding. I recall waking up from a nap and hearing a thud on the basement stairs. I thought it was my sister playing a prank on me, so I didn't pay it any attention. But then I started to hear regular footsteps pacing back and forth in the basement. I remember staring at the basement door, wondering what it would look like if someone was down there crawling around on all fours. The footsteps gradually got louder, which worried me, since our house was very old and the walls were paper thin. I decided I needed some fresh air, so I walked upstairs and into the hallway. From there, I could hear my mum speaking in hushed tones to whoever was in the basement. She always used to yell whenever she talked to my dad. I remember thinking how weird it was that she was being so quiet. I continued walking down the hallway towards my parents' room, still hearing the voices. That's when I spotted my little sister, who was kneeling next to a bucket. "What are you doing?" I asked. I heard footsteps in the basement, and Mum came down to check. She doesn't want me to tell you, but she was scared. My sister whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. I hugged her and said, "Don't worry," even though I was frightened myself. I let her go and walked away without saying a word. I remember looking back at her, but she was nowhere to be seen. I started to run to the basement to warn my mum, but my legs gave out and I collapsed on the floor. I looked down and saw that I was bleeding. I stood up, panicked, and ran to the bathroom. Blood was pouring out of a cut on my leg. I managed to stop the bleeding, but I was too afraid to tell my parents what happened. I laid down in the bathtub and pretended I was still sick from school. By the time my mum found me, I'd passed out. I remember her screaming and rushing me to the hospital. But when the doctors examined me, they couldn't find anything wrong. They sent me home that same night, but I haven't been back since. I haven't seen my mum or dad since, and no one has lived in that house for over 20 years. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Also, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss next week's episode. Everyone, stay safe.